Welcome the darkness into your heart.
So, just to get this out there, I don't like Brave Little Toaster. I never did growing up. The only thing I remember about it is the last song of the film, which is really the only thing I actually liked about it. And when I rediscovered the song back in 2014, I was just as captivated as I was when I first saw it as a child. And I thought and analyzed the lyrics in my head for a good little while with just how interesting each car's story is. The thing that makes their stories so interesting is that they're short and vague, and there have been many different theories expanding on the lyrics. So today, I'm going to give my own takes on the implications. Now, some of these theories are going to be repeats of what others have said, pretty much because I share the same opinions. So the song begins with the first two cars, whose verses are straight to the point.
I can't take this kind of pressure. I must confess, one more dusty road would be just a road too long.
His lyrics imply feelings of fatigue, from having to live such a life of stress for however long. It's quite plausible that he might have been overused by his owner, with just how worn down he looks. He doesn't even try to resist his fate, unlike all the others. He is reminiscent of an overworked employee, used and abused.
I just can't seem to get started. Don't have the heart to live in the fast lane. All that is past and gone.
The pink convertible is very reminiscent of an aging valley girl who went nowhere in life. And who knows, maybe that's who her owner was. Her lyrics do suggest that her past life might have had some form of excitement to it, but not anymore, leaving her alone to battle depression. She also stutters at the beginning of her lines, which indicates a dead battery.
I come from Casey, Missouri, and I got my kicks out of Route 66. Every truck stop from Butte to MO. Motown to old Alabama. From Texarkana and east to Savannah. From Tampa to Oklahoma.
The sports car's verse doesn't really explain how he ended up at the junkyard. He's just naming a bunch of locations he's visited in his prime, suggesting that his owner was a traveler. Also, pay attention to this small scene where we see his steering wheel turning left and right. Either he's trying to escape his fate, or it could be possible that the sports car, being as old as he is senile and thinks he's still on the road driving like he used to. And it just makes him being here even more depressing in hindsight. He's a drifter, old and unwanted.
I once ran the Indy 500. I must confess I'm impressed how I did it. I wonder how close that I came. Now I get a sinking sensation. I was the top of the line, out of sight, out of mind. So much for fortune and fame.
The first part of the race car's lyrics suggests that he wasn't a very good racer. So bad that even he was impressed by his closeness to winning. Especially since his second verse implies that something might have been wrong with him. And whatever success he gained was short-lived, and he became an afterthought very quickly. He's the injured athlete that lost relevance.
Once took a Texan to a wedding. Once took a Texan to a wedding. He kept forgetting his loneliness, letting his thoughts turn to home and return.
I took a man to a graveyard. I beg your pardon, it's quite hard enough just living with the stuff I have learned.
Apart from the pickup truck at the end, the wedding limo and hearse are the most infamous of the song. Because unlike the other cars that are crushed one by one, these two are crushed together. Not only that, but in their separate stories, they're put through similar scenarios and have similar roles as service cars, reminiscent of pallbearers and wedding ushers. They both sing about driving a man to where he desperately needed to be. The Texan to his wedding, and a corpse to a cemetery. So it doesn't take a lot to put two and two together. However, I want to debunk something. The most popular theory of the meaning behind the Wedding Limo's lyrics is that the Texan car crashed on the way to his own wedding, resulting in his death. That really doesn't make much sense. No part of her lyrics indicates a car crash happened. It sounds to me like this theory was just meant to explain away how the Texan died, since it's speculated that he's the corpse inside the hearse. Because if a car crash really was his cause of death, then the limo herself would actually look like she was in a crash. She doesn't. She just looks like she deteriorated over time. So, here's my own theory. I believe the Texan skipped out on his wedding day. The limo said he kept forgetting his loneliness, implying his only reason for wanting marriage. Then she said, letting his thoughts turn to home, and we turned. Meaning his commitment issues outweighed his loneliness, and he drove back home forgetting why he even wanted to get married. It doesn't explain his cause of death, but that's my own theory in terms of the lyrics. But, really, with this in mind, it brings another unfortunate implication considering the aftermath. There isn't much to say about the hearse. He sings of how he learned about the concept of mortality with every deceased person he took to a cemetery. He probably overheard a lot of disturbing stories on how each one died, so, who could blame him?
Once drove a surf at the sunset. There were bikinis and buns, there were weenies. Bellini just couldn't forget. Kiko, let's go up to Zuma. Kiko, let's go up to Zuma. From Zuma to Yuma, the rumor was I had a hand in the lay of the land. Get up and go hit the highway.
I'll be honest, the Beach Cars verse was very difficult to pick apart. Her lyrics are basically just a bunch of incoherent ramblings and repeats of past conversations. It took me a while to figure it out, but thanks to some research, I managed to find another person's take on her lyrics, and what they had to say about it made some sense. Her lyrics are mostly references to Hollywood. In fact, here's the whole story. The mention of Sunset, Pico, and Fellini strongly suggests that this car's owner lived or at least worked in Hollywood. Sunset Boulevard is a road that goes through Hollywood. Pico Boulevard is a road in that area, though it does not go through Hollywood and would be familiar to anyone who lives in Los Angeles. Federico Fellini was a big-time movie director, and Zuma refers to Zuma Beach in Southern California. The owner of this car was a very powerful, influential figure. Someone who knew people like Fellini and apparently indulged in hedonism. The last line tells us that this car had shaped the local landscape all the way to Yuma, Arizona. So not only was this car famous, but wherever her owner drove, it sounded like roads were built there. Highways getting built through open land will cause towns it passes through to grow, and towns it ignores to shrink, as well as new businesses being built along the highways themselves. And sometimes these businesses become well-known landmarks, and towns are built around them, such as Knott's Berry Farm and how Buena Park expanded around it. So this car has quite the history. But the general idea and the sad reality behind it are that although this car was famous and associated with such powerful people, in the end she'll wind up in the crusher like all the others. She's a beach bum turned washed up celebrity.
I worked on a reservation. us back to old Santa Fe. Once in an Indian nation, I took the kids on the skids with the hope he was happy till I heard him say, "You're worthless."
The best for last. The pickup truck's job was to transport Native American children to nearby proper homes in some charity organization that the Hopi, mentioned in the song, was a part of, who was also likely the truck's owner. However, he was soon replaced with a bus to fit more passengers in, and the truck was left behind as they traveled back to old Santa Fe, leaving him feeling inferior. In other words, he's the elderly reservationist whom no one appreciates. This truck is the most tragic of all for two reasons. One, he ended up at the junkyard for no other reason other than he wasn't good enough. Not because he was old or something was wrong with him. Yes, he's in poor condition, but that's from years of being left at the junkyard. Number two, unlike the other cars who are all immobile, the pickup truck is still fully functional in spite of his condition. So there's a possibility that he could still be useful in life because he can still function. But what does he do after being abandoned and called worthless? Well, there are actually 3 theories regarding what happens next. I can debunk the first one right now. It's been sugar-coated that he was just trying to escape the magnet but was unsuccessful, which I strongly disagree with because he wouldn't have just given up after only one attempt. Considering that he's still fully functioning, he would have left the junkyard altogether, so that's out. The second theory is, of course, the most popular one. He's committing suicide. Saving the magnet the trouble, he drives himself on the conveyor belt and just sits there waiting for his demise. And it makes more sense because the same people who loved him deemed him worthless to his face. So him not being physically broken doesn't compensate for being mentally broken, beyond repair at this point. And then there's a third theory I discovered not too long ago. I once found a comment revealing a piece of information about the song very few people knew. It turns out there's actually a cut clip of the truck saving the main characters from being crushed, explaining why they were all inside of him in the first place. So this action was meant to be a heroic sacrifice rather than a suicide. I really wish I had kept that comment, and I have no way of proving this theory correct. But if this really is true, then that gives his death a more poetic meaning to it. He wanted to spend his final moments doing what he's always done, helping others, and showing that he still indeed had worth. But sadly, it's too late. It doesn't change his own unwillingness to live. In any case of the context behind his final actions, he's still the perfect example of this trope. So all because of those who used to value him had beat him down emotionally, leaving him alone with his sense of self-worth shattered, and all at the cost of just trying to be useful, he was left as nothing other than wasted potential.